Hi everyone, welcome to our Cisco Lab session. In this session, we're going to learn how to leverage Notepad to create a TXT file with common configurations that we need to type it in using CLI on all the devices. So the main purpose of this lecture is actually to teach you how you can speed up the process of configuring devices using CLI. Now, it's very cumbersome to go to every single one of the devices that we need to configure and then type every single one of the commands to do the basic configuration on every single one of these devices. Now, if you haven't watched the basic device configuration videos that I've posted, I strongly recommend you to go back and watch them first. They will give you a very good overview of the basic device configuration that we can do on a router and on a switch. Now, for instance, I'm going to consider that you have watched this video already. So I'm going to consider that we already know how to set a host name on a device. We already know how to configure an SVI on a switch to be able to manage, to remotely manage the switch. And this is exactly what we're going to try to accomplish here. So we have all these four switches. They are connected. This is just an example. So the main purpose that we want to accomplish here is we want to be able to configure all these switches. Of course, we are going to change their host name. We're going to set up an encrypted password on all of them. And we're going to do this using TXT. Now, whenever you want to configure many devices and you want to do it quicker, you can leverage your Notepad. So because I'm running Windows, I'm going to open Notepad. It doesn't necessarily need to be Notepad, but it has to be a program that will allow you to create unformatted text. Okay, so as long as you can create an unformatted TXT file, it doesn't matter which program you're running. It could be Notepad++, or it could be anything else. Okay, now because I'm running Windows in this machine, I'm going to be running Notepad. So I'm going to open my Notepad, and from Notepad, I'm going to be registering all the commands that I'm going to type it in one of the switches, and then I'm going to use it as a template to basically configure every single one of the other devices. Cool. So let's get started. I'm going to go to switch number one. I'm already uh, inside of switch number one. I'm going to minimize my notepad for now. Now I'm going to go to CLI of switch one. I'm going to hit enter. And what we're going to do here is we're going to use switch one as a mock device. So we're going to configure switch one first. We're going to do everything that we want to do on all of the switches in switch one. At the same time, we're going to write down all the commands in a txt file as well. And you understand why am I doing that in a few minutes. So let's go to switch number one and let's start changing the things that we want to change in switch one. Now, I'm in user mode. I need to go to privilege mode first with the command enable. Okay. Now, every time I'm turning on the switch for the very first time, um, it is gonna go into user mode. I need to go to privilege exec mode with the command enable, and then I need to go to my global config mode with the conf t command. Now, because I haven't done anything in the other switches as well, they will be in the same state originally. I don't want to go into the switches and do this, so I can go to my txt file and I'm going to register that on my txt file. So once I first enter the switch, I type it in enable, I type it in config t to enter the global configuration mode, and after that I'm going to execute the commands I'm interested in. So if I want to change the host name, I'm going to type it in host name SW1. Okay, on my notepad I'm going to say that I want to do this for all the other switches. SW. Okay, I can change the number, so I'm just going to keep it as SW for now. You understand why am I doing this? After that, what we want to accomplish next is we want to set up a secret, an enable secret for this device with the command enable secret. Now the secret is going to be simply Cisco. I want to do this for all the other devices as well, so I'm going to put in my notepad as well. So it's going to be enable secret Cisco. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Now I need to set up a password as well for all the console ports as well on all the devices. I'm going to go line console 0 and I'm going to type it in password, and the password, which is also going to be Cisco. I'm going to type it in login to be requested next time. And now I need to leave my console line configuration and hit exit. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing for the line VTYs as well. And now I'm going to do the same. So I'm going to set up a password for the line VTYs as well. Cisco login to be requested next time, exit, and that's all I need to do to configure a password for the console and the line VTYs. Okay, I'm going to type it in because I'm going to need to do this for all the other switches as well. Now, whenever I'm doing this, I need to remember which mode am I in. So I just need to follow the exact same step by step that I do in one of the devices. So I have typed the enable secret before, then I went to the console lines, line con 0 or line console 0, doesn't matter. I'm going to type it in password, the password that I'm interested in, log in to requested next time, exit, and then I'm going to do the same for the line VTYs as well, 0 to 15, and then I'm going to do password as well, Cisco, exit, and that's pretty much all I need to do to configure a line con and a line password. Okay. Now, one interesting thing is the exclamation mark. Now, the exclamation mark is an interesting character because whenever I type the exclamation mark into the config and I hit enter, the device doesn't do anything. Okay. Now, I can take advantage of this exclamation mark to separate the commands when I have my txt file, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to separate things here a little bit, make things a little bit nicer. Okay, to separate the things that I wanted to accomplish, and that's all I need to do. It makes things much easier to read. It makes things much easier to understand. Okay, cool. Now what we're going to do next, that we're also going to do for all the devices, is set up an SVI, a switch virtual interface, that will be used to manage this device remotely. And this is exactly what we're going to do here. So in order to create an SVI on a switch, we need to type it in interface VLAN. So we're going to create a virtual interface, which is going to be the switch virtual interface, or SVI. I need to assign it to a specific VLAN. In this case, I'm just going to keep it to VLAN number 1. After that, it's just a matter of assigning an IP address to this interface. This is exactly what we're going to do here. IP address, it's going to be 192.168.1.1 for switch 1, 1.2 for switch 2, 1.3 for switch 3, and 1.4 for switch 4. Now we need the subnet mask as well. And that's all we need to do to configure the SVI. I'm going to do a no shut to bring the interface up. I'm going to hit enter again. Okay. Now, because we're going to have to do the exact same for all the other switches, I'm going to specify the same commands in the same sequence. So what I did was I went to the interface VLAN 1 to set the SVI to be using VLAN 1. After that, I assign an IP address straight away. Now remember that the last octet is going to change according to the switch that I'm going to configure. So I'm going to keep it as an X. Here the name is the same, so it's going to change according to the switch. I'm going to put an X instead. All right. Now after that, I need the subnet mask as well. And I also need to do a no shutdown. Now I'm going to use the exclamation mark one more time because I want to separate the commands in a logical order, because it's going to make my life much easier to understand what I'm doing if I want to understand what's going on here. Okay, cool. Now after that, I'm inside global interface configuration mode. I need to do exit to go back to our global config, and this is exactly what I need to do here as well. That's it. Now that I'm in global configuration mode, what I need to do next is I need to save my configuration. Now there are two ways to do this. We can do the copy run start, or we can do the WR. Now because we are inside the global configuration mode, we need the keyword do in order to force the command to be executed inside global config, because these commands, they originally belong to the privilege exec mode. So I'm going to do WR here as well. And as we can clearly see, the config is now saved. So I'm going to do the same here, do WR, and that's all I need to do. For now, I'm going to separate everything here, and that's all we need to do to configure the basics on a switch. Now, we cannot forget that these passwords inside the COM and the VTY lines, they are unencrypted passwords. So if I do a show run, they're all going to be displayed as plain text. Now, we need to remember that there is a nice command we can use to encrypt all these passwords, and that is the service password encryption. That is exactly what I'm going to do on my switch one. So let's do service password encryption. Now I'm going to register here as well because I want to do this in all the other switches as well. Cool. That's pretty much all I need to do. Now, let's say that we have VLANs on all the switches and we want to create VLANs on every single one of the switches as well. And because they all belong to the same organization, they will have all the same VLAN numbers and all the same VLAN names. Now, we can make our lives much easier by creating this template as well with all the VLAN names, all the VLAN numbers, and then we can apply them to all the other switches as well. And this is exactly what we're going to be doing here. So we're going to create some VLANs here. For instance, I'm going to create VLAN 10, and the name of these VLAN is going to be engineers, because it's where all the engineers will be connected to. Sorry, I misspelled engineer. Oh no, that was correct. Okay, cool. So name engineers, I'm going to save this here as well. So VLAN 10, that's what I did. And then I named it to be engineers. And that's all I did. Now I'm going to go back one mode. And now I'm going to keep creating the other VLANs. So exit. Okay, I'm going to use the exclamation mark just to separate logically. And then I'm going to do VLAN 20. Okay, name HR for human resources. Then exit. I'm going to create VLAN 30. I'm going to give it a name, which is going to be servers, where I'm going to be connecting all my servers. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did just in my txt file, so I can apply these to all the other switches as well. So there's human resources, exit. Then I'm going to create VLAN 30, name, servers, and then exit. Cool. Now, I have created all the VLANs now. Now it's just a matter of finding out how do we finally apply. Now, after that, I'm actually going to save the config again because now I have created stuff. So I'm going to do WR here. I have done all the things. And now I have a basic template with basic device configuration that I can just pretty much use on all the other switches without the need to go into every single one of the switches individually and type in the exact same thing. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to use this as a template for all the other switch configuration. Okay, so what you can do is you can save these txt file with a different name. For instance, you can save this one somewhere. I'm going to save it in the desktop with the name SW1 or SW template because it doesn't have any switch number. Then you can modify these files. So for instance, if you're going to be deploying this config to switch 2, you change the X for 2. So this is going to be, for example, switch 2, and then the IP address for SVI on switch 2 will be 2, for example. All right, so we can do this and then save with a different name. I particularly don't like to do that. I like to use the same file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this. So I'm going to use something like a dash, and I'm going to say this is my template, okay? Because it contains all the generic information, such as the host name and the IP address. Now I'm going to separate again. I'm going to use a dash again to separate, shows a little bit of separation between things here. And I'm going to say that everything below this line is going to be switch 1, or switch 1 is already done, so let's say switch 2. I'm going to use the dash line again. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to copy this whole thing right below the line. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to change the generic characters for the actual character I want switch to have. For example, the host name here will be SW2. Now, the IP address for the SVI on SW2 will be .2, okay? And everything else is pretty much the same for SW2, okay? So what I can do next is I can do the same. So I'm just going to copy paste this right below. And I'm going to say that now everything below is switch number 3. Okay. After that, I'm going to change the characters to reflect switch number 3 configuration that I'm going to be doing. And then the VLANs are the same. Everything else is pretty much the same. And now I need to do the same for switch number 4. So SW4, SW4. Now the SVI address on SW4 will be slightly different. It's going to be 4, and everything else stays the same. Now I pretty much have a TXT file with all the configuration for all the devices that I need to deploy, correct? Now it's just a matter of finding out how do I get this information from here and how do I put it inside every single one of the devices. Now that's super simple. Now stay with me. I'm going to close my SW1 CLI. Sorry. And I'm going to open switch number 2 CLI. So switch 2 CLI. I'm going to go to CLI. Now, an interesting thing about Packet Tracer is that Packet Tracer works similarly to what happens in the real world environment. Now, bear in mind that I'm doing this in Packet Tracer, but we can actually do the exact same thing for the real equipment as long as you somehow connected to the device and you are managing the device. That could be using the console cable if it's the first time you're configuring the device, or if it's through SSH or Telnet if the device has been previously configured. It's the exact same procedure. So as long as we are inside the CLI of the device, in this example here, I'm inside CLI of switch number 2, I can just basically pretty much grab all the configuration of switch 2 that I have just created based on the template. And what I can do is I can just basically copy this information and paste it inside the CLI of the device. Now, in Packet Tracer, it's just a matter of doing a Ctrl+C from the TXT file and basically clicking inside CLI and using the right button on the mouse. This is just basically going to allow us to paste the configuration inside the CLI of the device. And as we can clearly see, I'm going to demonstrate in a second, everything that I have just done is going to be done in switch number 2 as well. So if we just paste it, we'll be able to see that everything that we had before is now entered into SW2 as a command. So every single one of these lines is a command that I have entered. Now remember that the exclamation mark pretty much doesn't do anything. It's just a way that we can separate the things that we're doing. Now, after that, we can see that pretty much everything we enter has been accepted by switch 2. Now, if we mistype a command, it's actually going to show it to us that the command hasn't been accepted, and then we can go back and just review that specific command. All right. Now we have just deployed all the config on switch 2. We're going to do the same thing on our switch 3. All the basic config again, we can deploy into switch 3. I'm going to go copy paste everything I had prepared before into my CLI of switch 3. Paste. And as we can clearly see, every single one of the commands has been accepted. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same for switch number 4. Close this again. Switch number 4. I go there. Paste. And that's all we need. Now we have just done the basic configuration on all devices much quicker than just going to the device, typing in every single one of the commands on every single one of the devices is just not scalable solution. So it's a much better solution to start playing with the TXT files. You start actually use templates. So test everything that you've done in one of the devices first. Make sure the commands are correct. Make sure you're navigating through the different modes using the commands that you entered. Once you make sure everything is correct, everything is working, you can then proceed to utilize the template to deploy the configuration to every single one of the other devices that we have in the network. Now, every time we need to do a SW, simulated workplace assessment, I strongly recommend you guys to start doing this, especially if you are a slow typer. Okay, if you type things too slowly, or sometimes it's a bit hard for you to remember the commands, do the commands in one device, create the template, and then use the template to deploy all the other configuration on all the other devices. And that's pretty much what you need to know on this session. Thank you very much for watching this lecture, and I hope you can become a much better network engineer by knowing these CLI skills. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys next time.